In this session, we're looking at some of the big issues that face teenagers today. You know, over the years, people have often said to me, what's the big deal about being a teenager? I mean, we got through it in our generation. I don't care how young you are, if you've got teenage children, the world that you knew when you were young is quite different to what they're experiencing now. I remember listening to a psychologist some years ago. He said when he was a teenager, he walked down a corridor and either side of the corridor were doors. And on the doors were written things like excessive alcohol, promiscuous lifestyle, gambling, drugs. He said, but all the doors were locked. And he said occasionally you hear about one of your friends who'd gone behind one of the doors, but it was a big deal. He said today's teenager walks down that corridor and all the doors are open. And some of their friends are in the rooms. They say, what are you doing out there? We're having a great time in here. Come on in. But you know, since he said that some years ago, new doors have been added to that corridor. And almost all of them have to do with the revolution that's occurred in the digital world. Online pornography, sexting, and of course, cyberbullying. And all that means it's harder to be the parent of a teenager today. But before we use up all our emotion on us parents, let's spare a thought for those teenagers themselves. One 15-year-old boy put it like this. He said, people say to me, youth is wasted on the young. He said, perhaps it is, but I can tell you that sometimes being young doesn't feel so very great. But the greatest hope of dealing with these pressures lies in their relationship with us, their parents. But it can be daunting, can't it? Because for the first time in our lives, and theirs as well, they know more than we do. Getting them safely across the road was a lot easier than helping them negotiate the dangers of the latest social media site. And we all know that kids don't really want a parent that tries to be cool, but somehow, without stepping too much on their toes, we have to strive to understand their culture. Because only in understanding their world can we begin the conversations that help them navigate through the dangers and come out safely the other side, strong, mature, confident adults.
My parents don't talk about when they were a teenager that much, so I don't really know what it was like for them.
Back then it seemed so much simpler.
Easy to get a job back in the day.
Yeah.
Neighbourhoods were more connected as well back then as well.
They got a lot more trust than us. I felt like they were allowed to do whatever they wanted.
It's like they seem to have had an easy life when they were a teenager, but like now it's all about like what everyone's saying about everyone. And it's like everyone's so judgmental and you have to always like try and fit in and impress.
There's like more pressure on teenagers nowadays.
Especially like people like body image that, because it's just magazines, internet, people always looking and they want to look the best online.
You've got like influences on like social media and stuff like that they never had, and I don't think they can really relate to that now.
Like my dad in a phone, like, come on, it's never going to work.
It brings problems as well, obviously, like bullying and that.
You can get bullied from like anything, like someone can send you a death threat or something on your phone.
When you're 16, you're basically told to make all decisions for the rest of your life for GCSEs and that, and then that young age you don't know what to do, so it's quite hard trying to figure life out at 16.
Yeah.
We've got different challenges.
Definitely think I got different pressures to my parents.
Like if you see like a teenager without a phone, it's a bit like, I can't live without my phone. I couldn't live without mine.
Listen, I've had the chat with her. I think you ought to have the chat with him.
Yeah, fine, okay, not to worry. I've got it all under control, I know exactly what I'm going to say.
Good.
No! All right. Right, well, I've been meaning to talk to you now for some time about something really important. You know, really important, you know. No, you're right, let's leave it, shall we? Well, do some other time. Yeah. Remember I said we need to have that important chat. Well, I think it's important that we have it now. Do you know, I think that's my phone ringing. I'll speak to you later on.
Just do it, for goodness sakes.
Okay, okay. So, you see, the thing I want to talk to you about is, well, the thing I need to talk to you about.
Look, Dad, is there something you want to know about sex?
Well?
Yeah, really good. Nailed it.
I think the pressures for teenagers is enormous because of like the media things that they like Facebook and all this. They're never away from their friends, which in one way could be a good thing, but I find it can also be a really bad thing.
Where before kids could come home and sit in their room and switch off of the world, they've now got this 24 hours a day access to friends, and they've got access to them, so it's constant.
Well, you're either loved for who you are or hated. You can put something that would make your day and something that could really break it. Like something like a status saying about your day could be the difference between being liked by everybody and then everybody turning against you.
We've had bullying on the social sites with our girls, which wasn't very nice at all. So we've experienced that firsthand, and that was a very difficult situation when you've got somebody hacking in on an account, pretending to be one of your daughters, and you've got people ringing up and saying your daughter's saying this, that and the other on social media, and you know for a fact she's out in the garden on the trampoline with her sister, and it's not her.
Yeah. Watch what your kids do on the internet. I feel like you can't say that enough. A lot of kids do stupid things on the internet. I'm constantly like monitoring what my little brother does on the internet.
I think it's from school, choosing what you want to do to progress when you're older. I think the pressure comes from school.
One of the main stresses that like all teenagers always go through is exams.
If I'm not to get the grades that I want to, then I probably won't be able to go into what I want to do when I'm older and as a job.
I think teenagers as a whole have a lot more pressures these days anyway. Peer group pressures, keeping up with the Joneses.
It's looking nice, looking pretty, having the right clothes, the right makeup, having the latest hairstyles, the latest fashion, you know, and I think it's a lot of having the latest gadgets, you know, phones, computers, and they're all just trying to keep up with each other, really, and making sure that not one is less than the other type of thing.
The school that my teenagers go to, there's a lot of snobbery. You've got to be seen to have this car or live in a certain area.
I guess it's the same. It's the same ones that we face, but in different ways. So sex, drugs, alcohol.
Mostly peer pressures, alcohol, drugs. I think it's a big issue like now, because especially in society, like if people on the weekends, that's all the people seem to get up to.
Growing up too fast, feeling like they have to be there, do that with everybody else, and I think, you know, they're just not really allowed to stay young for very long. It's just gone so quickly, and it's a shame.
Yeah, definitely. Whenever I've got a problem, either at school or like something that I'm not sure about, I always go to my parents and ask for their advice or their help, and they always give it. So
I asked Nkweto, my 13-year-old, how he's doing, if he's experienced any bullying on the internet, or if he's bullied anybody himself, you know. He doesn't tell me anyway. So what I must say is they don't want us to know what they're doing on the internet.
Things I've talked about with my mates, because like it would affect us. Like fair enough, it affected them. How long ago was that? 20 years ago. And things have changed, so it doesn't really involve them at the moment.
I told my parents the other day about a girl at school who had a crush on a boy, and he asked her for nudes and she sent them to him, and he sent it to everyone, They normally act like she shouldn't have done that and like calm, but I'm pretty sure they're like really, really shocked inside.
So there's lots of topics come up, not just with him, but it's great to have a group of boys around where you can get one message to maybe 8 or 9 boys who are all going through the same thing.
I do manage to talk to them about the pressures that they're under. They'll come out to me and they'll quite openly say, "Mum, I'm feeling this or that."
Yeah, I'll come home and I'll be like, "Mum, you won't believe what they did today." And I'll be proper like, "Oh, there's just so much pressure."
Well, we've been taken back sometimes when some of the things they've come up with, but had really good conversations and discussions around it. And I think that's one good thing about our girls with us. They do tend to talk to us, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mostly tell them everything, and they do find out like they find out anyway, but
that's because I tell them.
Yeah.
Things I worry about as a parent I think is no different from any other parent. With everything that's out there, there's drugs, there's alcohol, there's bad men out there.
You know, they'll get into the wrong sort of crowd where they actually influence into doing things they wouldn't perhaps normally do, or even you expect them to do.
I worry about the friends that they're mixing with.
You trust your own children, obviously, but you just don't know what the environment they're walking into. So I think there's always that concern in the back of your mind all the time.
I feel as a, maybe, again, as a mum, the whole sort of explicit nature of violence and, you know, on television and the games that their friends are playing and they want to play.
The access to information these days is at the tip of their fingers, literally, on their smartphones. I worry what kind of information my children are accessing.
I worry how they're doing in their studies. Their education is very important to me.
The last thing you really want is teenagers being influenced by children that aren't as driven, who pull them back slightly.
The thing that I worry about the most is him leaving home, I think, is making sure that he's ready for it. Is he prepared enough? Have we taught him everything that he needs to know? Is he going to be sensible? Is he going to be safe? Is he going to make good choices?
Yeah, you just want to know that your child's going to be safe forever. You know, you don't want anything to befall them. You want them to be able to, you know, if they're healthy and happy, gee whiz, 2 fantastic qualities to have throughout your life.
Oh, it worries me that we are not bringing her up for her to be ready when she goes. She still doesn't pick up her socks. So it worries me. It worries me.
I have 2 girls. One is now 18 and the other is 14. We moved to a new area and my eldest started a new school. She started year 10 and she was being bullied by a group of girls. She coped with it for a few months and then all of a sudden she just mixed with not a good crowd, hanging around superstores or the town centre with a big gang of them. It was, you know, it was quite a lot of them. And being quite intimidating. And then weekends she would be out drinking. When she was coming home, I could see the pupils in her eyes, the mannerisms, that confidence of being really forthcoming in the way she spoke to my husband and myself. She'd gone from being able to hold a conversation to confrontational all of the time. Just being a parent, you ask where you're going, you know, are you going to be safe? And it would always be, oh, you're checking up on me and you don't trust me. And I didn't really know what she was getting up to. Didn't know if she was in a relationship or if she was sleeping around. So my fear was that she would get drunk, sleep with somebody and fall pregnant. That would have been the hardest to deal with, I think. Trying to treat her as a young person and not as a child, but then getting the answer back as a child was really, really difficult. We as parents could not physically change her. We had to just let her go. She knew we were there for her, always, and we had to wait as parents for her to come through it, to go through her messy stage, shall we say.
Well, in this session, we're going to be looking at the big pressures that are on our teenagers today and how as parents we can help them make good choices. And it's really great to be joined by Jason Royce and Rachel Gardner.
Hello.
So, Rachel, in the work that you do with teenagers, we just heard that mum telling that story about her daughter getting involved with a different crowd and how she tried to help her through that. Is that something that you come across often in your work with teenagers?
Yes, absolutely. I think I really feel for her, actually. You can hear that sense of wanting desperately to treat her as the young adult she's becoming, but getting back this kind of wave of immaturity and sullenness and I don't want to talk to you. And I see it time and time again. I think as parents, we often feel that our children suddenly sort of move into this season of adolescence and don't want to talk to us anymore.
And what are some of those pressures, Jason, that face our teenagers today?
Well, obviously you've got the things that we all kind of know about, like sex and alcohol and drugs and some of the kind of fears that have been around for parents for many, many years. And increasingly, we've now got young people's interaction with the digital world. And whilst there's lots of great possibilities and lots of fantastic things, creativity that can come from that, there are also with that some concerns around, parents talk to us about violent video games and worries about pornography. But a lot of this stuff kind of comes back to young people's interaction with their peers and seeking peer approval. Peer pressure plays a massive part because young people are striving for approval. They want to know where they fit in. And I think parents don't always realise that their approval is really important to their young people, but so is the approval of their peers. And so sometimes young people will engage in risky behaviour or take big risks because they think that that's what their peers expect of them. And I love to ask young people, what do you think your peers need to know about, as a way of finding out what they need to know about as well. And I said to this lad, what do your peers need to know about sex and relationships? And he said to me, you need to be talking to us about pornography. He said, those guys in that classroom over there might not admit it, but they're all watching pornography and no one's talking to us about it. Whenever I work with young people and see their thoughts on sex and relationships, they're so pornified, they're so informed by the world of pornography. They think it's normal. They think it's normal for young people to watch pornography. And despite the fact that there's many young people that don't watch pornography, but their world is so affected by it and their peers' opinions on sex and relationships are affected by it. We've got to be talking about that with them.
And so what can parents do to help our teenagers?
Well, Catherine, I think probably a very important thing in the light of all of this kind of new world digital media is probably for parents to stop and think, what is it about all this that makes me feel disempowered? Because I think one of the big myths that I come across time and time again as a youth worker and a parent myself is the belief that somehow teenagers know everything and they don't need me anymore. Young people do know a whole heap of stuff in culture that possibly I didn't know when I was 15. About, particularly if you think about sex, some of the things they might see or witness. But it doesn't mean they know more about the kind of the nuances of relationships or how to make decisions. And so they might know some stuff, but it's kind of stuff that hangs out there and it's not very rooted. And one thing that parents and step-parents and carers and grandparents have in abundance is life experience, wisdom. We know how to pick ourselves up after a mistake and kind of dust ourselves down and move on. And it's that kind of stuff that I think our teenagers need to hear from us. So not us telling our teenagers everything about our lives, but letting them in a little bit on, oh yeah, when I was faced with a big decision, this is kind of what I did and I made a mistake there and I kind of came back from it. And I think for all the digital age is so powerful and so exciting for young people, nothing out impacts a parent. Nothing actually would be more powerful, really, than being in a home environment where you know that you're loved and valued and reassured, even if your behaviour is terrifying your parents parents, or you actually don't want to talk to them about stuff, if you know that you have a safe place where you are valued and loved, that will go a long way, I think, to helping combat this.
I think it's really interesting to, or certainly as a parent, to discover that our teenagers do actually want our advice. They do want to know what we think about things, even though that's not the impression that they give us. But also I think it is a time when they're finding out who they are and they're making relationships with friends that are separate from us as their parents, and we don't actually need to know everything.
One model is that we can sort of say no to stuff that our young people are experiencing that we're afraid of, and we can say, no, stop doing that, don't do that, no more of this. There's another way of engaging with it, which is to say, let's come alongside you and help you to understand the world that you're experiencing, help you to understand the way that you're changing, that your identity is being built, that your peer group are engaging, and let us be trusted advisors who will walk alongside you. Now that's really difficult for parents because they're emotionally engaged, and actually for me as a youth worker, I don't lose sleep about where the 14-year-old is that I'm working with during the day. They haven't come home till 11 o'clock. I'm not losing sleep over that, but a parent does. And I think it's that love that a parent has which motivates them and drives them. But saying, I'm gonna engage with them differently, and I'm gonna walk alongside them and say, let's look at this together. What are you experiencing? What are your values? What are your thoughts about this? You know, the constant reassurance of you're okay, you're doing okay, you know, you're the one that makes decisions. I think we have to honour that, you know, when we're in a parenting role, which is difficult because you can't say to them at parties, you can make your own decisions, no one can force you to do anything. But then when you're in the home, we're going to think for you and force you to do stuff. Actually, that growing independence means that we've got to relinquish some of that maybe power or control. We have to let some of that go because they've got to learn in those other situations that we want them to make good decisions. They've got to practice that with us as well as away from us.
I think some of our young people are going to be more vulnerable to being in situations where they suddenly realise, oh, the atmosphere's changed. I don't know how to handle myself here. I remember my dad actually was awesome. His whole thing, he was a very strict dad, but his whole thing was, whatever time of night you call me, I'll come get you, and we'll talk about it another time. And I think there's a recognition, isn't there, that for all that our teenagers, we want to release them to be themselves and to find themselves and to recognise that we often do learn through our mistakes, but actually giving them exit strategies, remind them they always have a choice. We mustn't punish teenagers for using the exit strategy, even if it inconveniences us. Actually, if it means they're safe and they're making a positive choice, let's not punish them for that. Let's use that as a conversation later. Like, I'm really proud of you that you made that choice. There's a difference, isn't there, between victim mentality and power mentality. And I think sometimes for teenagers, if they haven't learned how to make choice, we talk about positive choices, but you have to make a choice, don't you? Victim mentality says, everyone else makes a choice for me, I just have to go along with it. Power mentality is, I might not like the choices, I'm going to call my mum, but at least I know I have a choice. And that's what we want, I think, for our teenagers, to really equip them with a power mentality. You can do this. We trust you can do this.
So many of us as parents, it's a challenge to try and keep up with the things that are difficult for them, the challenges, you know, that are facing them. And that's where I think youth workers and other people outside the family maybe can help.
I think they can. I think there's a very great need that teenagers have to have other trusted adults who they can kind of go to if they feel they can't talk to parents. And it isn't a slight on the parents if the teenagers talk to somebody else. I think, look, you know, as a parent, look for the other adults in your network who you would trust your teenagers talking to.
And so there are the things, aren't there, that are kind of common to most teenagers, the pressures that most of them will face to do with, you know, alcohol, being at parties where drugs will be, social media. But I think for some families, it is a really, really difficult time. And I think if parents do find that their children are involved in very risky behaviour, there is a moment actually when they need to get outside help and to find some professional help maybe, just to help them through that time, because in those situations it can be really, really hard.
And there are lots of people who can help, and I think as one of those people who would be involved in some of those situations, what I find really works is where a parent or step-parent or grandparents, whoever's looking after the teenager, says, actually, I'm going to open up, this is not quite working, would someone come and help? And recognise that actually nobody is judging the parents. Actually, we can recognise there's other factors here, and we want to help make this work, and recognise that the relationship between the teenager and the parent is really key, even if at the moment it feels really fragile. And I see great stories of actually parents being able to work with their teenager through really rocky times, stuff you never hoped for your kids, never planned for them, but actually with the right help, I think there can be real hope in those situations.
Yeah. And what about, I mean, Jason, in the work you do with teenagers, when you've seen other people parenting on their own, when it's co-parenting, so maybe teenagers spending different parts of the week in different homes, how does that work out?
One of the things I often find myself saying to parents, and I don't think they hear it often enough, is you're doing a great job. You're actually, you love your young person, you want the best for them. The fact you're asking these questions, the fact you're wrestling with this stuff is because you love them and you recognise the stuff in their life that needs some input. And I think also within that is recognising that even though you're doing a great job, you can't do it all on your own, and you're not supposed to. So who else is there who can come in and support? Maybe it's professionals in some cases, but for many parents, maybe it's just, is there, if I'm parenting on my own, is there someone of the opposite sex, a trusted adult, maybe from within the family, maybe a friend, who can come in and give some input, so that young people have got someone to talk to who shares some of your values and who is on board with what you're trying to do as a parent and is not going to go against you, especially for single parents. I think over and over again, I hear parents say, actually getting an extra role model in has been really helpful.
Yeah. And Jason, I mean, I know growing up, well, just tell us a bit about that for you as a teenager.
Yeah, so obviously for me, growing up with a disability, I never really saw it as a disability, to be honest. I realised that my body was different to my sisters and my brother, but my parents were really, really firm actually about treating me the same and expecting the same from me as they expected from my brother and sisters. I mean, my dad is probably still the same today as he was back then. He's a very consistent figure, and I think that was a massive part in me kind of forming my self-esteem, because my dad would treat me exactly the same, and my mum too, but we've all got our struggles. You can just see mine. And actually, the young people that I'm working with, now they struggle with how their bodies look. They don't have necessarily less limbs than everyone else, but they're still struggling with how do I look? Am I attractive to the opposite sex, or do people think that I'm attractive? Do people think that I'm cool? And I think we're all struggling with that to a certain extent. And I think that process of becoming comfortable in your own skin is a real key one in maturity, developing maturity.
And I guess, for all our teenagers, there'll be different pressures, but actually if as parents, at the end of the day, we can be there for them, we can understand their world, and we can help them know who they are, that really will be equipping them to make good choices in this world of unlimited choices.
Yeah.
So Rachel, out of all the things that we've just been talking about, if you had to give one top tip to parents of teenagers, what would it be?
I think my top tip would be find as many ways as is humanly possible to keep reminding your teenagers that you are here for them, and to also spell out what that might mean. I'll come and pick you up. I'm always prepared to have this conversation. I won't punish you for wanting to talk to me about something. I'm unshockable, or if I'm shocked, I'll hold it in. So just find as many ways as possible to let your teenagers know that.
Brilliant. And Jason, what about you? What would be your top tip for parents of teenagers?
My top tip would be, it's never too late to start. The best time to start having these big conversations is right now. And don't let your fear of getting it wrong stop you from having the conversation. You don't have to have it perfect. You don't have to have everything you're going to say planned out. Just keep going.
Brilliant. Guys, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you.
Some years ago, a psychologist wrote a book called Parenting is Not for Cowards. And those words have come back to me so often as I've tried to get my own kids through the teenage years, and I've shared them with thousands of parents all across the world. Of course, there's no fail-safe method of parenting, no blueprint. And actually, when it comes to their own children, there are no experts. Just people trying to get their own kids through as best they can. Now, of course, good parenting will affect our children's lives positively, but even then, there are no guarantees. I remember standing by the touchline of a football match and a dad speaking to me. He said, "Rob, have you any idea what it's like to call the police to your own son?" He said, "My boy attacked my wife." He said, "I go to visit him now in the Young Offenders Institution, and every time I approach the gates, my heart sinks and breaks." This is a great dad, a fantastic mum, but there are no guarantees. It's hard for us as parents. But you know, modern life is so hard for teenagers as well. Sometimes people say to me, school days are the best days of your life. Perhaps they are. But I don't think I'd like to go back to being a teenager again. Even now, I can remember those tensions, so desperately wanting to be part of the group, and yet sometimes because of that, being pressurized into doing things I knew my parents would disapprove of. Somehow we have to help our teens navigate these years, but it's not easy, is it? Because so often they appear not to be listening to us. They might even say, "I'm not listening to you." But all the research shows it's us they want to hear from. At heart, they want to hear what we think about these big issues. We're helping to get them ready for a world that in many ways is hostile to them. That needn't depress us, but from the time they're small, we have to begin letting them know what we think is right or wrong, passing on our values. Now, of course, pretty soon they'll work out themselves what they believe is right or wrong. But the really scary thing about values is they're more easily caught than taught. You know, sometimes we complain, "My teenager's not listening to me." Perhaps the problem is quite the opposite. Perhaps the real problem is not a word is lost. They are listening to everything we say and actually as well watching every action. They're watching particularly how we deal with them. If we want them to be honest, are we honest with them? If we want them to have a healthy respect for others, we have to show a healthy respect for them. But of course, we've already said there are no guarantees, and sometimes our children will make bad choices, and sometimes that will cause us as their parents tremendous pain. But even in those difficult circumstances, they have to know we still love them, we are still there for them, and they have to know we are still committed to help get them through. There are no perfect mums or dads, and when they're grown, they won't judge us by whether we got it all completely right. No. Successful parents will receive a simple accolade. My mum, my dad were always there for me. But none of it is easy, which is why the title of that psychologist's book was so very right. Parenting really isn't for cowards.